Can't nobody hold me down. Oh no.
Y'all, the verdict is in. And let me tell you, the internet is broken. For months, we've been on a roller coaster with the Sean Diddy Combs trial. We've seen the raids, we've heard the whispers, we've read the sickening allegations. We all sat here, glued to our screens, wondering, would the untouchable king of bad boy finally fall? Would justice be served? Well, on July 2nd, 2025, a jury in Manhattan delivered a verdict that was so shocking, so complicated, it sent everyone into a tailspin. We heard not guilty, and in the same breath, we heard guilty. So what the hell happened? How can he be both? Oh boy, you ain't ready for this tea, because this story is not about a simple win or a simple loss. It's a bombshell with shrapnel flying in every direction, and we're about to pick up every single piece. Stick around, because we are diving deep. Part 1. The day the gavel dropped. Alright, let's set the scene. Imagine the tension in that New York courtroom on July 2nd. The courtroom sketches from that day tell their own story of the atmosphere inside. You could cut the air with a knife. Diddy, in a suit that probably costs more than my car, is standing there, stone-faced. The jury files in, and, as reporters who were there noted, they wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. That's when you know it's serious. The judge gets the verdict form, and the clerk starts reading. Let's go through the big ones, the charges that would have put him away for life. Count 1, racketeering. The big one. The charge that says you're not just a person who did bad things, you're the head of a criminal enterprise. The clerk takes a breath. On the charge of racketeering, we, the jury, find the defendant, Sean Combs, not guilty. Boom. A gasp in the courtroom. You can almost hear Twitter letting out a collective scream. The biggest, most serious charge gone. The prosecution's entire theory that Bad Boy was a criminal machine, the jury didn't buy it. Then comes the next one, sex trafficking. The charge that alleges he coerced and forced women into the industry for his own sick gratification. On the charge of sex trafficking, we find the defendant not guilty. At this point, it looks like a clean sweep. It looks like another celebrity walking away scot-free. You can practically see the headlines writing themselves. Diddy acquitted. But wait, there's more. And here's where it gets messy. The clerk keeps reading. On the charge of transporting an individual for the purposes of prostitution, he reads another similar count, both related to the Mann Act, a federal law from 1910. Honey, designed to stop people from taking women across state lines for immoral purposes. And on those 2 counts, the verdict was different. Guilty. And then again, guilty. Let me get this straight. The jury said he's not the head of a criminal empire. They said the prosecution did not prove sex trafficking beyond a reasonable doubt. But they did believe he was guilty of illegally transporting people for prostitution. It was a split. A confusing, shocking split verdict that left both sides claiming some kind of victory, while also taking a massive L. Can you believe that? The biggest charges, the ones that dominated the news for a year. He beat them. But he is not a free man. He is a convicted felon, and his fate was sealed in that moment. Part 2. The Road to Ruin, a timeline of chaos. So, how did we even get here? To understand the earthquake of that verdict, you have to feel the tremors that led up to it. This didn't just happen overnight. This was a slow-motion car crash a year in the making. It all started, as we know, in November 2023. Boom. Cassie Ventura, his longtime partner, drops a $30 million lawsuit with allegations so horrific they turned my stomach. We're talking years of abuse, control, and that infamous hotel video. Now, that lawsuit was settled in less than 24 hours for an undisclosed amount, which many people thought was Diddy just throwing money at a problem to make it go away. But the feds were watching. The lawsuit wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. It opened the floodgates. More lawsuits started pouring in from different women, each telling their own horrifying story. Then, everything changed on March 25th, 2024. Y'all remember this. We saw it live. News helicopters circling over Diddy's mega mansions in Los Angeles and Miami. Put that footage on the screen. Look at that! Federal agents from Homeland Security, armed to the teeth, swarming his properties, carrying out boxes of evidence. His sons, Justin and King Combs, were placed in handcuffs on the lawn. It was a message. This wasn't some civil dispute anymore. This was a full-blown federal criminal investigation. For months after that, it was quiet. Too quiet. His private jet was tracked flying to the Caribbean, and people thought he was on the run. The world was holding its breath. Then, in late 2024, the indictment dropped. The U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York unsealed a list of charges that included racketeering, sex trafficking, and violations of the Mann Act. The government was going for the king. They weren't just trying to convict a man. They were trying to dismantle an empire they claimed was built on exploitation. The trial kicked off in May 2025, and it was a circus. We're talking witness after witness, painting a picture of a world fueled by power, money, and depravity. They alleged these wild parties weren't just parties. They were recruitment centers. They alleged recording sessions were traps. It was a clash of two realities. The Diddy we saw on TV, the successful mogul popping Ciroc, and the monster the prosecution was describing in that courtroom. And for 2 months, the world watched, wondering which version the jury would believe. Part 3. Inside the courtroom. Secrets and tears. Now, since there are no cameras allowed in the federal courtroom, we have to rely on courtroom sketches and reporter testimonies to understand the sheer drama that went down. And what really gets me is thinking about the people who had to get on that stand. Let's talk about Casey's testimony. According to multiple reports from inside the courtroom from outlets like the New York Times and Business Insider, when she took the stand, the entire room went silent. She spoke for days, her voice reportedly shaking at times, as she detailed the alleged abuse that started when she was just a teenager. She had to recount the most traumatic moments of her life in front of a room full of strangers and in front of the man she was accusing. Can you imagine the strength that takes? The defense attorneys, of course, went ham on her, trying to paint her as a scorned lover out for money. They brought up her book deals, her new life, anything to discredit her. It was brutal. But it wasn't just her. The prosecution brought out a parade of former bad boy employees, assistants, and other women. One witness, a former producer, testified about the alleged freak-offs and parties where Diddy would film everything. He claimed there was a vault of tapes. A vault. This became a key part of the prosecution's case. The idea that Diddy used these recordings as a form of control and blackmail. One of the most disturbing moments came from a woman identified only as Jane Doe No. 3. She testified that she was flown from New York to Los Angeles under the pretense of a recording session. But when she got there, she alleged she was drugged and assaulted by Combs and another man. Her story was central to one of those Mann Act charges. Her testimony was reportedly so emotional, the court had to take a break. The defense, led by superstar lawyer Aaron Dyer, fought back tooth and nail. Their strategy was simple: attack the accuser's credibility and create reasonable doubt. They argued these were all consensual relationships. They framed the parties as typical rock star behavior, not a criminal enterprise. They painted the accusers as opportunists who came forward only when they saw a potential payday. They were trying to tell the jury, don't believe these women, believe the legend, the icon, the self-made man. And for some of the charges, it worked. Part 4. The Law for Dummies. Why the verdict was so crazy. Okay, so let's break down the legal stuff, because this is where it gets wild and explains the split verdict. This isn't boring, I promise. This is the whole ballgame. First, you have the RICO charge, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. To get a conviction on this, prosecutors had to prove that Bad Boy Entertainment wasn't just a record label, but a long-running criminal organization like the mob. They had to show a pattern of criminal activity. The trafficking, the assaults, the alleged financial crimes were all connected and done in furtherance of this enterprise. That is a super high bar to clear. The jury looked at all the evidence and basically said, we see some bad things, but we don't see an organized crime family, so acquittal. Next, sex trafficking. This is another one with a very specific definition. It's not just about sex, it's about using force, fraud, or coercion to make someone engage in a commercial sex act. The prosecution had to prove Diddy forced these women, that they weren't there consensually. The defense hammered this point, arguing that these were adults who made their own choices to be part of a wild lifestyle. The jury, again, must have had some reasonable doubt. Maybe they believed some of the stories, but couldn't agree that it met the legal definition of trafficking. So, acquittal again. And then we have the Mann Act. This law is over 100 years old, and it's much simpler. All the prosecution had to prove was that Diddy paid to transport a person across state lines for the purpose of prostitution or any other immoral purpose. That's it. It's way more straightforward. The testimony from Jane Doe number 3 about being flown from New York to LA was a direct arrow to this charge. The jury didn't need to believe he was a mob boss or a trafficker. They just needed to believe he paid for a flight for someone with the intent of prostitution happening at the destination. So, let me get this straight. The jury essentially said, we don't think you ran a criminal mafia, and we're not sure you illegally trafficked these women. But we do believe you put this woman on a plane to come have sex for money or perks. It's a legal needle that they threaded, but it's why you can have this bizarre outcome. He beat the charges that carried the life sentences, but he got tagged with the ones that still make him a convicted federal criminal. The math wasn't mathing for a lot of people online, but when you look at the law, you see exactly how the jury got there. Part 5. So what now? Jail, lawsuits, and no way out. The verdict is read, the courtroom is in chaos, but the story is far from over. Don't think for a second that Diddy was going home to his mansion that night. Oh no, honey. Immediately after the guilty verdicts were read, his legal team asked for him to be released on bail pending sentence. They probably offered a crazy amount, millions of dollars, home confinement, an ankle monitor, whatever it took. And the judge looked at this man, this icon, who for decades seemed to be above the law, and delivered the ultimate blow. Bail was denied. The judge deemed him a flight risk. With a conviction now on his record and the prospect of prison time looming, the court wasn't taking any chances. So Sean Diddy Combs was escorted from that courtroom in handcuffs, not back to his lavish lifestyle, but back to a federal detention center. Let that sink in. He remains in jail right now, as I'm recording this, awaiting his fate. And that fate will be decided on his sentencing day, which is tentatively set for October of this year. Those Mann Act convictions are no joke. Each count carries a potential sentence of up to 10 years in federal prison. Now, he'll likely get less than the max, but prosecutors are pushing for a substantial term. They're going to argue that his wealth, his power, and his lack of remorse demand a harsh punishment. This man is facing years behind bars. Years. But wait, it gets worse for him. Remember all those civil lawsuits, the ones from Cassie and all the other women? The criminal trial is over, but the civil battles are just getting started. The standard of proof in a civil case is way lower. They don't need beyond a reasonable doubt. They just need a preponderance of the evidence. Basically, that it's more likely than not that their claims are true. And now, they can walk into court and say, look, a federal jury already convicted this man of crimes related to this behavior. That guilty verdict is a massive weapon for their civil cases. His financial empire, what's left of it, is about to come under siege. He's fighting a war on two fronts, one for his freedom and one for his fortune. Part 6. The defense's audacious next move. Now, if you think Diddy's team is just sitting in a corner crying, you don't know how the super rich play the game. They are already planning their counterattack, and their strategy is bold. First up, the appeal. This was a given. His lawyers have already filed motions for a new trial, claiming the jury was biased by the media circus and that certain evidence shouldn't have been allowed. They will appeal this conviction all the way to the Supreme Court if they have to. This legal fight is going to drag on for years and cost millions more dollars. But here's where it gets truly jaw-dropping. We're getting a sneak peek at their appeal argument, and it revolves around those tapes, the alleged vault of recordings. Court documents and reports reveal their new angle. They are planning to argue that the activities shown on any tapes aren't prostitution, but rather private, consensual, amateur pornography. I literally gasped when I read that. Let me get this straight. Their defense is going to be, he wasn't transporting women for prostitution. He was just flying them across the country to create his own personal porn collection. Can you believe the audacity? They're trying to rebrand potential evidence of a crime as a quirky, kinky hobby. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. On one hand, it could be seen as a desperate, disgusting attempt to downplay the exploitation. On the other hand, in a weird legal sense, it might create just enough of a distinction to challenge the prostitution element of the Mann Act. What would you do in that situation if you were on the new jury? Does that argument sound plausible? Or does it sound like the most out-of-touch, privileged nonsense you've ever heard? It shows that they are willing to go to any length, to spin any narrative, to keep this man out of prison. They're not just fighting the conviction, they're fighting to control the story. Even now. Part 7. The internet erupts. Celebrity privilege on trial. As you can imagine, the second that split verdict hit the news wires, the internet went nuclear. It was split into two very distinct, very angry camps. First, you had the people who were absolutely furious. They saw the acquittals on the biggest charges as a massive failure of the justice system. The hashtag celebrity privilege was trending within minutes. People were saying, see? If this was a regular person, they'd be buried under the jail. But because it's Diddy with his money and his high-powered lawyers, he gets to beat the serious charges. Twitter went crazy. Reddit detectives were going ham, pulling up old interviews, old clips, anything that showed a pattern of behavior they felt the jury ignored. And we have to talk about 50 Cent. For over a year, he has been on an absolute crusade against Diddy, trolling him relentlessly online. The moment the verdict came in, his social media was like the Super Bowl. Editor, throw up some of his posts right here. He was mocking the outcome, basically saying Diddy got away with it, while also celebrating the fact that he's still a convicted felon heading to jail. It was a masterclass in kicking a man while he's down. Then you have the other side. A smaller, but still vocal group who saw this as the system working. They argued that the prosecution overcharged him. They threw the kitchen sink at him with that RICO charge, and it didn't stick because they didn't have the evidence. These people were saying, our system is built on beyond a reasonable doubt, and if the jury had doubts, they did their job by acquitting. They see it not as celebrity privilege, but as proof that you can't convict someone on public opinion alone. And then there's Reddit, where you can see the debate in real time. This verdict has become a cultural Rorschach test. What you see in it says a lot about what you believe about money, power, and justice in America. Do you think they saw the red flags and let them off easy? Or do you think the jury meticulously followed the law and made a tough, nuanced decision? Let me know in the comments which side you're on, because the debate is raging. Part 8. The fallout and the final question. Was this justice? So, as Sean Combs sits in a federal holding cell, the dust is settling and we're left with the wreckage. What does this all mean? The bad boy empire is in shambles. His reputation, once Teflon, is permanently destroyed. He will forever be known not just as a music mogul, but as a convicted felon. This case raises so many questions. It puts a spotlight on the dark underbelly of the music industry and the power dynamics that allow predators to thrive. Was this a win for the #MeToo movement because a powerful man was finally held accountable and convicted of something? Or was it a loss because he escaped the most damning charges, the ones that spoke to a long-term pattern of abuse and terror? And here's the final, most disturbing plot twist in this entire saga. According to some political insiders and news reports, there has been speculation, just whispers for now, that Diddy's team might be exploring the most audacious Hail Mary pass of all time, a presidential pardon. Can you even imagine? It seems insane, but in the world we live in, with politics and celebrities so closely intertwined, is anything really off the table? It adds another layer of grim uncertainty to this whole story. So here's what we know for sure. Sean Combs is a convicted felon. He is in jail. He is facing prison time. He is facing financial ruin from civil lawsuits. His legacy is in ashes. But he also beat the charges that would have sent him away for the rest of his natural life. It's a messy, unsatisfying, and deeply complicated ending. Or maybe it's not an ending at all. The real final chapter will be written on sentencing day. I need to know what you all think. After hearing all of this, was justice served? Was this a win, a loss, or something in between? And what do you think the judge should do at sentencing? Throw the book at him? Or show some leniency? Light me up in the comments below. I'm going to be reading every single one. This story is still developing, and you know we will be following it every step of the way, especially when that sentencing day comes. So make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell on, because you are not going to want to miss our update on that. Thank you for coming through and unpacking this absolute madness with me. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next video.